Hello, welcome back to the podcast, Keep Out of Reach from Young Children. This is Mental Medicine Not Prescribed. Today we have a licensed associate counselor, art therapist, and freelance photographer. Please welcome Kathy Riveros. Welcome to the show. I just want to preface this to the audience. We talked about this previously before we actually started recording, but I'm high on caffeine, and I'm 18, so this go two ways. One, I'll shit my pants, or two, this will be a pretty good podcast since I am thinking really fast right now, and I'll probably have a lot of conversation. I think right now, though, I'll probably shit my pants. That's probably the 50%, actually 80% likelihood because, let's just say I feel a bit of gas coming on. And, with that comes the floodgates that open up. Sorry for the audience. I don't want to talk about shit too much, but speaking of shit actually is a great word, I think, because, it could be used in so many, different contexts. Like, this shit is good, right? It's a pretty good phrase. With that word, it kind of means like, oh, this thing is so good it shouldn't exist, right? I think that's my take on it. I mean, do you ever have like a moment where you say, oh, that's shit, or this shit's good, or something like that?
Oh my gosh, yes. Wait, so that was actually going to be one of my questions. I can curse? It's
Yeah,
okay to curse
you
here?
can curse.
Okay.
This is really explicit, so it's only for
Okay.
18.
I know. Oh my God, we're going to be like, oh, is this person professional? Um, good. Um, Great, because I have a sailor mouth. I've been working on it, but it's just so you mentioned the word ship. One of my favorite words is like the word fuck. Because again, you can bring it into so many contexts. Like, oh fuck, that was amazing. Or like when you're angry. Just so many ways to express that word. So I hear you with the word shit. So I'm there with you. I'm there.
Yeah, I mean, fuck is a great one as well. I mean, I have a phrase that I usually say. It's usually paired with hell, fucking hell. That's what I say. It's like usually like, oh, fucking hell, I did it, or fucking hell, I can't figure this software out, right? It's a great versatile word for curse words usually because it could be used in many contexts. Um, and I usually kind of also say it internally when I'm looking at art because it's so good that you can't use any other word for it. So I'm like,
Hmm.
oh wow, this shit's great, or fucking hell, this
Yeah.
is majestical, right?
Yes.
And with art, with shit actually, I today I think I'll probably take a picture of my own shit because it's going to be interesting. Sorry for the audience again. I'm talking about shit again, but it's fine. Talking about literal shit actually. Um, so it's been great. I mean, I feel high on caffeine, so let's just get started, I guess, with the actual questions. Um, and I'll start with what art form is your favorite? Because certain types of art could be, more wow factor than others, right? So,
Hmm. Mm. So I actually went to undergrad, Mason Gross, at Rutgers. My concentration was drawing. I mean, I've always loved drawing. I was obsessed with it. Um, the thing is, and I'll bring it into like how like my career has shifted and how getting into art therapy has helped. So when I was younger, I used to pretty much only work with pencil, charcoal, anything black and white. I was like very rigid on that. Yeah, drawing it like very expressively at first. I remember I used to be like, oh, it has to like look perfect. Like I was stuck on that. It has to look like the figure. It has to look like exactly what I'm drawing. Um, but I think it was during like my thesis time that I finally like let go and I was able to be like, my work was like a mix of expressionism, surrealist work, um, a lot of movement. And then years passed, and I was still working on my artwork. And it wasn't until I decided to go back to school for art therapy that I started feeling more comfortable. And shout out to my cohort because like they really helped me explore color because it was something I was very afraid of. I was like, no, like I don't know, it's like mixing all these colors. And mind you, like I studied color theory too, but it was just something I was like very afraid of. Um, my best friends now that I'm still very close with since grad school, they got me into crochet, which I have here because like it really helps me when I'm anxious. And I'm a naturally nervous person. And so right now I'm very into crochet, I'm into watercolor, and so I had moved from like northeast Jersey to northwest where I'm at now. Um, I had a really bad commute. I worked in Jersey City, which I love that job, but the commute was awful. Ugh, 80. And what is it? I realized I'm like, I need something to help me de-stress. I need something to cope because I was just like working and working and working. So actually, they opened up a studio in town, and since I've been doing a lot of pottery work, so a lot of ceramics. I tend to go I like sculpture. Right now, I'm actually working on creating like my pets in like a frame. It's
Oh, wow.
you'll see. But yeah, so right now I'm all over the place, but like I'm gravitating more towards ceramics, watercolor, and crochet. That was a lot. I'm also caffeinated. I'm also like, woo!
Yeah.
So on a Sunday.
I understand that. Completely understand that. You talk about like anxious as well. That kind of adds to it. Anxiety kind of is like sometimes you're kind of so anxious that you kind of speak excitability and stuff, and then you kind of take back words here and there. It's a very different sort of feeling that people would think with anxiety being just negative. Sometimes it could actually be alright, but
Mm,
sometimes there's anxiety where it's kind of like, oh, I'm afraid to be near anything, right? So, um, you also speak about surrealist work. I love surrealist work personally. It is chaotic, just like me sometimes. And I literally have an entry in my journal that says, "I am chaotic mind. I am chaos embodied." That is like the literal journal entry of mine in the journal. I love surrealist artwork. I also like modern art, which can be kind of upsetting for some people out there because people are like, "Modern art? That's not art." But I'll be like, you know what? That looks great. That looks abstract. I could deal with this, right? It's more about like having no structure for me with art because that's just feelings,
mhm.
right? Um, and with feelings, that's what you're supposed to feel with art, and that's what kind of brings art to a different level for people who are struggling with anxiety and mental health. Because looking at art, creating art, you're just using your feelings to do it, right? At that point, and you're just letting everything be expressed. Um, do you feel like certain types of art can be more effective for one person than another for creating art, or is there like one thing that works better for for example, anxiety?
Um, okay. So one, it depends on the person. So like let's say I'm meeting with a client and I see this often because I also was like this when I was younger too. Just working with like a mechanical pencil, black and white, black and white. So sometimes, right, and I work with the client too. I meet them where they're at. So sometimes when we think about like our window of tolerance, just like pushing through a little bit and saying like, all right, so how would it feel if we work with a medium that sometimes we don't have much control, like watercolor, or like let's say clay, right?
Yeah.
For anxiety, yeah, so it just depends on the person. I love that you said, what did you say? You said something about exactly like you know, the way I tell people like in sessions, I'm like, I'm not here to judge. I'm not an art teacher. There was a reason I didn't go back to school to be an art teacher because I was like, I don't want to grade. I don't want to judge. I feel like that sets limits. And I think the best work, and this is how I approach my art too. I'm like, I don't go in with like a very rigid plan anymore, even like with ceramics because it's unpredictable. I go, okay, I'm gonna try to do this. And if sometimes like I make a mistake, I'm like, all right, let me work with this mistake. There's a happy mistake. I had a professor say once, like, there's no mistakes in art, just happy accidents. I was like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll take that in. Um, Now going back, and I'm sorry, I go all over the place. It's the ADHD in me. Um, for anxiety, so um, crocheting, knitting, it's the repetitive motion that's like very soothing. Um, Bilateral um, drawings, like using both hands would be a great thing. I tell people often, I'm like, you don't have to make something perfect. I'm like, scribbling, whether that's like for anxiety, whether that's for anger, right? And keep it contained too. I always think about safety. Like trauma informed comes out in me. Like for example, because sometimes like if we give someone like a big paper, right, it's overwhelming. It's like, oh my God, I have to
Yeah.
create something. So sometimes I just even think I was like, all right, let's just start with something small. Let's start with a little index card. Um, if that's too big, sure. Let's start even smaller. It is okay. And let's see where we can grow. Um, and yeah, um, there, I think about like art therapy and therapeutic art making. Coloring is very therapeutic too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I'm usually telling people, I'm like, there's let's go back into like that inner child, right? Let's go back to the past, like let's explore that part. Because usually that part is like that comes out is like very helpful and like soothing ourselves and like when we're very dysregulated.
I'm twitching so much right now. Sorry. I mean, I agree with
It's
that actually.
okay.
Yeah, I'm eyeing my coffee, which is right here, and I'm like, I really want to take a drink of this, but I know that I'm going to get way even more excitable, and my heart will beat at 100 miles per hour, which will lead in me blasting off the space. What is wrong with my camera? It's blinding the audience here. Sorry.
Listen, drink water. Drink
Drink.
water. You will see me like drink a lot of water.
Yeah. I have like water here, but it's been a month, so I'm probably not gonna drink that. It's like, I have a bad thing about hoarding. You speak about like coloring and sort of sketching as well, and with me, I'm just a literal printer. I'll look at like a sketch online, and I'll be like, that's cool. I want to draw this, copy it. My mom is the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. That's just my kind of art. I noticed like my friend, she is a talented artist. She draws like very great digital art. She has like a Apple Pen on like an iPad, and she draws like Pokemon, Zelda. She's a great big fan of cartoons and stuff. So I love her art. I kind of recently partnered her up with like my cousin. They're starting a business together,
Oh,
and
nice.
they're the same personality actually. So that might clash actually with like a few things with creative, but otherwise they're kind of same introverted, kind of anxious kind of people who don't want to be as known. But for me, I like showing off my art sometimes if I actually do art, which is actually more rare than it usually was. Back then, I used to draw so much art that it was my whole wall was just paper. And my mom would be like, "You gotta clean up this mess. This is incredible, but it's looking like you kind of demolished a tree and pasted it on the wall. It's just too much paper." So yeah, I did take it down. I like black and white sketching. That's usually my style. Um, do you think like art is effective because it's more dealing with your hands and stuff, or is it more effective because it's people being able to finally let go?
Oh my God, that's a great question. Um, do I have, where's my book? As our therapist, um, for we have the expressive therapies continuum, so it's pretty much like the art therapy Bible, for lack of better words. And I like that you said that like using your hands and stuff. So I think what's so effective about art making, and when I say art making, it doesn't necessarily mean just like what you would think about like painting, drawing, etc. I feel like you can bring in like the movement, the music, and everything. Um, it's about, it can be very kinesthetic. Like for example, crocheting, that repetitive movement with clay work. Um, Even if like let's say I have a big paper and I'm going like that with charcoal. Um, I'm trying to think of going up the ETC. It can be very symbolic for people. Um, that is very therapeutic. We can get into like a very cognitive state just to think about like, okay, like where are we at? I know for me, which um, during my undergrad thesis, I did like two very big murals. I think that was the first time I had processed a lot of things that had happened to me, a lot of trauma. And I didn't realize it until like my murals were huge. Or like one was 22 feet and the other one was like 14. I was very ambitious. I don't know what happened to me. And looking back at it, I was like, oh wow, like all of these things I was holding in, which I didn't even know about, which like looking back now, I'm like explain like my moods. I was holding in like a lot of anger, a lot of discomfort in my body. Um, so yeah, I think that the beautiful thing about art making, which whatever medium you choose, is, when you finally do let go, it's a very great start to like processing a lot of things and getting to know yourself, right? A lot of like introspective work. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. I know I go all over the place.
Yeah, well, I'm about to go, south of that as well, so don't worry about going all over the place. It's fine to go on this one. I was just about to say, I remember what I was about to say before again. It was back in, I took like a art camp back when I was, let's see, about 15, well, 12 to 15 actually. and there was like this exercise where we blindfolded ourselves, and then there was music playing. We just scribbled on paper. That's it. And it's a great way of. I felt so soothed at that point, very relaxed because I just didn't have to look at anything or do anything
Mm-hmm.
except for letting my hand flow to wherever it wanted to go. Right? It wasn't thinking. It was more just feeling and letting your feelings guide your hand around the paper. And that is a great way for you to relieve stress. You talked about being ambitious earlier. Um, I'm being ambitious right now by trying to talk more and drink more coffee, but ambitious is great. And with my idea sometimes goes to like trying to view something that is incredible and absolutely stunning, and I ended up with something that looks like it came out of a kindergartner's hands. Because I'm sometimes so ambitious that I don't know what my skill is capable of. That was the case for like a model that I created in like architecture. It was like I was trying to create like a dome, which is very
Mm-hmm.
hard in architecture because like domes are very like round, and I wasn't good at creating those round shapes. So it's very ambitious. I was like, I'll create three domes and I'll connect them together, and it'll be like 12 feet big and 2 feet tall. And then I was like, okay, this is way too ambitious. But at that point, it was like more of feeling like I was able to do so much stuff, and creating it made me feel you know awesome, like I was top of the world because I actually thought that while creating it, I was more free. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. And then viewing it, that was different. That was like, okay, maybe I went too far with this, but at the same time, I love it because it's my own creation. Which brings me to the next question, which is like, looking at viewing an art is very different from creating it, right? What certain feelings can a person have when viewing art as opposed to like creating art? Um, because both can be equally effective sometimes, but sometimes one is more effective than the other.
Mm-hmm. Um, oh wow. I, I'm gonna use the statement that we often use a lot. It depends. It depends on the person, right? I can't speak for everyone. Um, so I don't know, like I'm trying to think of like speak for myself right now. Visually, like when I know I can't, I've been trying to make something and I can't, it is always good to like, let's say like go to a gallery, go to like a museum and see artwork. And then or like follow artists or like look up artists, especially artists' work that have influenced me in the past. Sometimes I'm thinking of like Marina Abramovich, right? Like in the past, what does that perform? She's done like so many great performances in the past. There's one that she did at the MoMA where she just like sat with people. Um, and then you just see people like crying, just having like a very like visceral reaction, and just by sitting. And then like think about it, it's like you know, sometimes like if I had to like guess like what people were experiencing, like maybe like being seen for the first time. I think that's what art can do sometimes. Like oh, like I don't feel alone. Um, uh, it just like touches the soul. If I know I'm sounding like very cheesy right now, but like I think art has a great way of just connecting us all. And the great thing is like we can all have different meetings. So like I can look at something and be like, wow, this is amazing, and someone else can be like, I don't get it, and that is fine.
Yeah.
That is fine, right? Um, your thoughts are valid, your experience is valid, and I think just allowing yourself to be in that moment and not thinking about like what is right or what is wrong in terms of like am I understanding this artwork correct? Like sometimes it is just like, oh, this is very pretty, and that is okay. And sometimes like, no, like this touched me in this way, XYZ, and that is okay too. So I think it depends on the person. Depends on the person.
Yeah, I mean, I also agree with that. I mean, there's times when my friends are like, "That's not art," and I'm like, "Well, it's okay to have valid feelings about that, but I think it's art because I could see something in it. Actually, I could see what the artist is actually trying to, you know, do, and it is, like I said, arty. When I kind of misspoke or something like that, it is very arty, I guess. And with art and stuff and expression, you can't really kind of restrict that because restricting that is just going to lead to more conflicting feelings between people, which is kind of similar to like I guess with anything where people are judging, because people who judge, that type of thing usually are going to be more kind of constricted into what they think is the right path, or like there's going to be a definitive thing for them that is correct, or like sort of the right way to go about things, which is kind of what
Mm-hmm.
the community of like um, race, sort of the LGBTQ community, even art, anything that has like a very free or not really constricted sort of format, people are going to be confused about and more judgmental about. And that
Mm-hmm.
leads me to like the LGBTQ community, where they've been sort of making progress, right? In my school, there's definitely a lot of people who are starting to feel more free about themselves and their expression, but there's still people out there where um, it's gonna it's gonna make people gonna feel a bit more uncomfortable. Um, and the truth is, LGBTQ has been around since like the ancient Egyptians, but people didn't really know about it until like people didn't really start accepting it until like the late 1900s. So um, I guess people just didn't want to be viewed negatively, which is kind of how I had a friend who was he's no longer goes to my school. I don't know where he is, but I feel like he was more isolated because he just he was different, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I usually find him, I sit by him, but sometimes it was just uncomfortable for him to be around. So I guess he just moved out of my school. But this leads me to my next question, which is like, what misconception about LGBTQ is most common amongst society?
Um, just to think about the top of my head right now, that because I've heard this before, it's that it's like a phase, or people don't know, like they're just trying to be like in with the crowd, and I hate when people say that. Um, because I've worked with um so many, like I work with kids, adolescents, teens, adults, older adults, and people really do know um themselves at a very, very, very young age. I've worked with kids that like they they start expressing like their gender identity um like the age of 2 and stuff. And it's always nice when I hear parents, providing that safety for people to explore. Um, I know personally from my experience, when, I've had to do a lot of unlearning and relearning a lot of things throughout the years. Um, like in like my household, it was like, oh my gosh, like no, no one can be gay. Um, like it was a bad thing. It was like a taboo, stigma, all of that. And even I think about like now, like bisexuality erasure, right? Like, oh no, you're either like straight or gay. Um, there was like, think about like my life back then, like there I there wasn't a word for like non-binary, or like what is it, gender expansive. Um, so it is all of that to go see. Like it's just, when people are, I always tell people, I'm like, be authentically yourself. It is okay um to have questions, to, explore your identity, explore your sexual identity. There is nothing wrong in that. Um, and, right now, especially like with our political climate, I might get emotional right now. It's just really sad to see like this very overt hatred towards people, especially like the LGBTQ um, I plus community. They hold a very like special place in my heart, and it wasn't until like grad school that I like started feeling safe, like even exploring like my gender identity, my sexual identity, like so it's just believe people, and like they're not hurting you at all. So it's just like let people be authentically themselves, because when we like suppress people, it just does so much more harm. No good at all. And I don't know. Just my heart goes out with a lot of like marginalized communities right now, because like we are all going through it. And it's right now it's a very good time to like lean into community and um when I'm thinking about like that friend you said that moved away, I'm like, I wonder, I was like, was there like no community um in the school? Because I've seen that before. Like I'm even thinking about like my high school at the time. Um, people people weren't that welcoming, or people like were like very a lot of judgmental, very judgy. So I think community is a great thing to build. And if there is no community, like, you know, maybe leaning on supports like, oh, let's create community here and there. Because that's always a good start. But yeah, wow, I went
Yeah.
off.
And he's probably not listening to this right now, but I think, back then, my friend was just, they just found out that, they were different. And there was a community, but I don't think they knew how to connect with them, right?
Hmm.
Because it was such a new feeling for them that they kind of, they just were like, I can't be like that. I can't be, different than what I was taught to be. So I feel like they kind of restricted themselves to such a sort of later in life stage that they kind of were unable to connect with the other people that were like them, right?
Hmm.
And they weren't able to find people who were able to connect with them correctly or help them feel like themselves. So that I think that just feel made them feel worse about themselves, as well as the fact that they were dealing with family, affairs and stuff that were pretty bad at that point. They did not disclose to me what it was, which is fine. It's their privacy.
Hmm.
But I just kind of feel bad about them. I have texted them before, trying to get a response, being like, "Are you okay? Are you dealing with anything that you need to talk about?" And they just didn't respond back. I texted their mom as well, but they didn't. Her mom didn't respond back either. So I was just I was left in the dark about them, and I'm kind of feeling bad about it because they were a very good friend actually. They were the only friend I actually hanged out with outside of school, because they were able to go outside and actually play ball and stuff. And their mom was encouraging as well, which I actually now think about it. It was probably mom that actually forced them to go out to play because they were very introverted. They were like, I want to play GTA. And I was like, okay, don't just sit there, come out and play. I mean, I want to play tennis. So, um, but, I feel like the earlier you find out about it, the more easier it is to kind of find a community for anyone. Even
Hmm.
if it's just like, even if you're not LGBTQ, you're just like, you want to find someone to have a community with. It's just early to find a group of people like yourself because that kind of makes you understand it. So um, it's just more about like be me, and then you'll find more friends like you. So that is a great way of trying to deal with any sort of problems, whether that is not finding the right community or not finding like the right interests. It's all about finding them the other people earlier on, and talking about like when and stuff. When did you first notice that you were different? Like, what was your experience with LGBTQ? Did you struggle with your identity that way, or what's the sort of backstory behind that?
Yeah. Um, so I'm Latina, and when I was younger, I never really held like a very, very, very strong connection to like girlhood, right? I was never, and I know, so I guess I was like back then, like what they would like say, like a tomboy. And then in Spanish, um, my family would call me like marimacha, which is not like the best term. It was like a very manly girl, woman. And at first I would be like, stop calling me that. But then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna take this word and make it my own. Like, whatever. I'm going to like reclaim that power. And I was like, yeah, I don't like the like the stereotypical like girly things. I didn't want to be just considered as a girl. Like I've always embraced like my feminine and my masculinity. And I loved it. But there was always, I felt there was barriers and things that I felt like I had to like stop myself from like exploring too much when I was younger just because I didn't feel safe. And honestly, this is something that I've just started feeling a bit more comfortable sharing, since like the last 5 years. Um, like I remember I've always like loved you know sorry, there's like a fly in here. I'm like, oh, these gnats, damn plants. I would always like to, you know, express myself with like different types of clothing. I would wear my brother's clothing as well as like my own clothing. Like nowadays, like I'll shop anywhere. I'm like, clothes is clothes. Why is it gendered to begin with? Like, it doesn't make sense. I'm like, I want these pockets, definitely. Um, and like I remember during undergrad, I had a project. I wonder where it is now. That I had photographed myself, um, like very mass presenting. Um, and I remember like my mom like freaking out about it, and she was like, "Oh, what is this?" And I was like, I'm just like trying to express myself." I was like very into like back then like androgyny and stuff. I'm like, I like the fact that I can go between back and forth, but again, like I didn't feel like that safety component within my family. So it is something that like I always had to like push down. And then again, like in and that goes even well like with my sexuality and stuff. I was like, no, I have to you know, I have to present as like a cisgender person, heterosexual, because like I one like the fear. And I also grew up like very, very Roman Catholic. Um and I was like, it was like that Catholic guilt back then, and also like I don't want to lose my family, because then where would I go? But going again, I think just grad school like really helped me accept myself, um, accept that okay, I don't know exactly, like I don't have to put a label on it right now, ever. It can change here and there. Um, and it's never too late. It's never too late to explore yourself. Um, and I have friends now because I surround myself with like really good people that just accept me, and they're like, okay, cool. So feeling again, and it's like that. I've built that small little community, um, and they've provided that safety and that acceptance. And even like my partner, like he's very great, and he's never judged me or anything. He's always accepted all parts of me. And that was new too. So I was like, wow, like I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel validated. And yeah, and I've also worked a lot with LGBTQ youth, especially like in the Hispanic Latino community, because it is, community is so like deeply rooted into um, what is it, like the Catholic Church and religion and everything like that. And it's, what I do now a lot is like providing that education. I love doing parent sessions, parent work, family sessions, being there to support anyone or even adults. I've seen adults like just like discovering themselves at a later age. And I'm like, that is okay. There is nothing wrong with you. Um, and yeah, just providing that safety of like what, like as a therapist, like um, how can I be there for you? How do you want me to be there for you? Do you want me to just be there, just to listen, to be like the mediator, or yeah, just what do you provide that extra education? Because I think that educational component is so important that a lot of people don't know. Um, like especially like right now, and I think it's also important as people just to constantly like keep learning. Um, So, myself as like a therapist, I'm always like, it's like for me, I'm like, I have to keep learning. So like I just recently went to a wonderful training, um, because like with everything going on politically, like I have to be like, okay, how am I going to support this community and make sure like they are safe? Um, whether that's like through my writing and my notes or F codes, um, how to do outreach and stuff. Um, So yeah, yeah, that 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 went all over the place again. But yeah, I'm just trying to offer that support to people. Mhm.
Yeah, you talk about religion and stuff, and with I kind of grew up with a very religious grandma because she had problems with anger back then. She went to church, and that church was more restrictive. They didn't appreciate any sort of LGBTQ stuff like that. Anything they saw was like out of the norm for like, okay, it's either man or woman. They would be like, that doesn't exist. Stop doing that, right? They would have that very restrictive view on it, and they're all very old and stuff. So like, I feel like that kind of adds to the fire, being like, it's something new. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to do this sort of woke stuff, this woke shit. There's there to sort of stop that, right? And I remember with like my friends, I have like a my neighbor is she's tomboyish, but she's her church is more acceptance of that. But my grandma, at knowing that, kind of had like a sort of a hate for doing that. She's like, don't hang out with her anymore. And my grandma was like, okay, that friend, that other person I was talking about earlier,
Hmm.
kind of moved away. She was like, don't hang out with them anymore because they're going to influence you, and that's going to be bad. And then they're going to bring this very bad sin into our house. And I just didn't make any sense of it. I was like, how could that even happen, right? I'm born like who I am. I am straight, but no one could. It's a misconception that people can influence you to be like different than what you are, right? So I just feel like that was such a wrong way of thinking, and religion was a big part of that for her. But religion can also sometimes be more accepting. There's churches out there that see with
Hmm.
like the flags out there being like, I support you, I'm an ally to you here, right? But there's also churches who are more restrictive. I get the kind of struggle against that type of structure versus old structure versus new thinking, right? So,
Hmm.
um, but leading to the next segment, because I feel like I've prolonged this way too long. Has there been a point in your life where you struggled with any mental health problems? If not, did notice someone else that went through mental health problems? What was their experience? What was your experience?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I was diagnosed with ADHD like very late in my life. So realizing that, I was like, wow, this makes so much sense. And like looking back at like my childhood and interactions with teachers, things that were said, like my difficulties, like with schoolwork, with testing, um, it made a lot of sense. And when ADHD like goes undiagnosed, like it is not uncommon to see like a lot of anxiety and depression. That is something also I've struggled with. Um, and yeah, yeah. Uh, what I will say is, from what I've learned, and I always tell this to clients, especially like new clients. So when they come in, I go, hey, listen, I want you to know, like, we always thinking about like accessibility, costs, and stuff like that. Because little backstory. When I was younger, I saw a lot of therapists, but I didn't know I had a choice in like saying like, you know what, this isn't fitting. I don't feel heard. I don't feel understood. I'm going to seek someone that is going to hear me out, and be, you know, I feel more safe in that environment. And so I grew up on Medicaid. Um, we were very poor when I was younger. And so like the system right then and there with like mental health is like all messed up. Um, so I remember like these doctors would, I would say something, they're like, all right, here, take this med and this. And I was like, okay. And then when I would come back and I'd be like, well, this isn't working, or I'm not feeling great with this. They're like, just keep taking. It's fine. You're fine. You're fine. Or I've even had providers be like, oh, you know what? Take this because you won't gain weight at all. And I was like, that wasn't even something I had brought up. I'm like, honestly, I'd rather feel better than think about my weight. Um, and so what I tell people now, and especially my younger clients. I'm like, when you come in and it's like, we're working, and you go at one point like, you know, I think with Kat, like we've reached a point of like it's been plateaued, um, or like, oh, maybe I'm not feeling Kat. Like, and that is okay. I just go, I'm not gonna get offended. Like I want you to get what you want out of therapy. So I tell people, I'm like, let me know, and I will do my best to find you like I refer you to someone that, maybe you'll vibe better with, or maybe they will offer something that I can't, because I'm not perfect. I never say I am. Just because I'm a therapist doesn't mean that I know the person more than they do. Absolutely not. Um, so I think letting people know, like, hey, if you're not getting, or like telling your therapist too, or whomever is like supporting you, right? Like, hey, I don't need this, or can we do this differently? Um, is so huge. And, I finally found like a really great therapist for myself. Again, very late in the game. I've been working with her, I think, for like the past 4 years. She's amazing, Michelle. But what is it? Um, yeah. So it's about like finding like the right support, and also um, the people you surround yourself with. Um, and again, I do a lot of like reflective work on myself. Um, I didn't realize how much of how unsafe I felt about telling people like what I was struggling with, because I usually would hide everything. I kept it very to myself. So when stuff happened, people were like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah," but then I didn't get like that follow up of like, "Hey, are you okay?" Or like, "What kind of support do you need?" Um, so yeah, it's a struggle, and like I always tell people, something you said earlier, which I really like 'cause anxiety, we have anxiety for a reason, right?
Yeah.
It's our body telling us like, do not touch that. Don't go off the edge of the building to look at like the nice flowers, like that close to the edge. That's a little dangerous, right? Or like warning us like something's off. Um, it's when like our nervous system is like very hyperactive. It's like, oh no, 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 no. Like let me. That's when we have to really address that anxiety. So anxiety has its purpose, and then also like we work on it. I know anxiety is something I'll always have. It's something I work on every day. Something that helps me is like I outwardly say like, "Whew, I'm like feeling very anxious today." I think just saying it out loud, whether it's just like to myself or to someone, is super helpful. I know what tools help me out now. I do like a lot of like mindfulness work. I do a lot of deep breathing. Um, I truly have crochet everywhere in my house, because I mean, like even like right now, I've just been like, because it truly does like soothe me a lot. Um, and and with depression, it's been a battle, but something that I've been, and I advocate a lot too in sessions. It's like practicing like that self-compassion. Before self-care, you got to practice that self-compassion with yourself. Like, tell myself, all right, we're going through it right now again. Mm, like this sucks. Yes, this really sucks. Like naming it. Like, I'm going through this. I hate it right now. Allowing myself to have days where I'm like, I just want to be in bed and just like do nothing, watch TV. And then it's like, okay, I can't stay in bed the whole time, like for like a whole week. Um, let me do things that I know help a little bit, even if at the moment, um, I'm still like, like for example, this is why I love animals so much. I was going through a very hard time, and it's when we got I call him my puppy, but he's 3 now. Um, yeah, because when I moved here, because I was in school in Philly, and then I moved here, and then like that adjustment was very hard because I'm used to city life. Like I'm used to people yelling outside my door. Da, 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 da. I'm like, I could sleep. And then here it was like crickets. I was like, wow, like I can legit hear the crickets outside. It's very like quiet. So I took that adjustment very hard for myself. And also, um, my language, Spanish, is very important to me. And then coming here, I didn't hear that much. Um, and I was like, oh my God, like there's a lot of white folk here. Like, where's the diversity around here? There is. I just had to like look and find, right? But I struggled for that for a bit. And we got a puppy, our third dog. And what helped me too, I was like, I don't want to do anything today, but you know what? Like, let me go and take him for a walk. Because one, it's good for him. He needs it. He's a puppy. He's going to destroy my house if he doesn't. And two, I think it's good for me because it kind of gives me that little purpose, those little mini goals. And so I started leaning into those little mini goals. So I always tell people, I'm like, let's not aim for big goals. Let's aim for little mini goals. Like maybe is it today? Like let's brush our hair, or let's maybe make a special a meal that we like, or let's let's go like try out like a little hobby, whatever it is. Um, I tell people, like, be kind to yourself. When we lose that kindness, like things are just so much harder. So self compassion, 1,000%. I feel like all my clients must be like, oh my God, because I say that all the time. I'm like, self compassion. We must practice self compassion with ourselves. We are not perfect. Perfection is unreal, right? So I think repeating that and like remembering that, like, no one can be perfect. We're not perfect. If we were perfect, we'd be boring robots, like that. Ew,
Yeah,
right?
literal
Yeah,
NPCs. That's what I said
yeah.
in my school.
We're like,
Like one dialogue about like, hey there, how's your
yeah,
day? That's
hi.
that's going to be like the people, with perfection and stuff. But getting ahead of myself there. You talked about like therapy. My therapist personally has not been helping that much, but I have been helping myself through that though, because I guess in that way she is kind of bringing me into thinking about myself more, which is kind of how I like to live my life. Because, for example, this podcast, I've been thinking to myself, being like, oh, I could work on this, I could work on that. Being like, I didn't know that problem was there, but I could fix that, right? And that kind of is how I think about it with like even like phobias and fears. I'll be like, I have a phobia of like roller coasters. I'll just go on a roller coaster just to deal with it somehow, right? Go on more,
Mm-hmm.
experience it more, and it'll sometimes just go away by itself. You feel like, hey, this is not that bad. I do a lot of insight thinking about myself, being like, okay, this is something that's I've been doing for a long time. I'll try and deal with it in the most severe way possible, which is like, for example, my anxiety. I'd be going on a podcast, trying to talk to people about it, trying to share my experience, because I feel like it's, first of all, good content. Second of all, I'm able to sort of deal with it at the same time, being like, okay, I'm getting used to public noticing me. I'm not as socially anxious anymore. In my school, I don't notice that much people talking about mental health. It's more about like, oh, I'll just internalize it, keep it all inside, right?
Yeah.
I had a friend who doesn't want me to talk about it, but I have another friend as well. I think I'll talk about it them instead, because they're fine with this, and they kind of dealt with their own problems. They never told me this, right? I got a vibe, but I didn't really know what it was, and it kind of, in my school, it kind of acts as like a friend's repellent, because no one wants to hear you kind of vent out your frustrations or your problems in life. It's kind of a negative thing people were kind of uncomfortable talking about. For example, I'll be talking to my friend about like something I dealt with that day that was kind of stressful, and they'll be like, "Mm-hmm, okay," and then there would be a silence for a solid 10 minutes before I'd be like, "Hey, how's the weather?" And that's when they'd be like, "Okay, yeah, I'll talk about weather, but I won't talk about feelings and stuff, right?" And I'll be like, "Great, but it's all right, but um, I'm dealing with sort of problems with friends, lonely here and there and this," and they'll be like, "Okay, let's talk about math more." And that's the sort of conversation that we go about it. And it kind of comes down to culture as well.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings me to the next question, which is like being born and raised in a Latin household. Did you notice like cultural differences on how your parents thought of mental health as opposed to like how your other friends from other cultures handled it?
Oh my gosh, yes. Um, I remember still, like, to this day, like my mom would say a lot, like, anxiety is not a real thing. Like that's like your generation thing. Like we didn't have anxiety. Um, and so that was a huge one. The same way, like with depression, like what do you have to be sad about? That was a huge one too. Um, and I, you know, it was very frustrating at the time. I was very invalidating at the time, but throughout the years, I've learned, try to think of like a different perspective. Like, okay, where was my mom coming from? Like, right, where was my family coming from? Um, was one like, why were these conversations I had, or like, did they not feel safe having these conversations? Right. And then also, I know like my era, like we grew up with no computers, no phone, and then we entered phone and computers, right? Like my mom's, it was like no computers, no cell phones, no nothing like that. So I'm just thinking about like, how society has changed, like technology and all these things we have grown with. Um, and trying to go back to the question. Um, yeah, it was it was very interesting, but I had this wonderful moment recently with my mom because like sometimes we'll still butt heads and I'm like, like I don't feel heard, like you don't understand. Um, Even as an adult, um, like having to say like, this is real, this is easier said than done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I think it's especially like with parents, who grew up with like different beliefs and stuff. I always tell people, I'm like, well, try to get to know your parents. Try to get to understand like where they're coming from. Or, it's all about you know, ask these like sometimes I'll assign people these like little task homework assignments of like getting to know each other. And it starts with like, do you believe in aliens or do you believe in this? And then we'll slowly the questions will get bigger and bigger. Um and yeah, so going back, like I recently had a great conversation with my mom, but I was just like telling her a couple of stuff and it was great because like I think I did tear up because she was like, you know what? She was like, thank you so much for, giving me this information. Thank you so much for like educating me on these topics. Um, and it's practicing a lot of like one, self-compassion for myself, compassion for her and people that just do not understand. Um, I'm a huge believer that anyone can learn and has the anyone is able and has a capacity to grow, right? You just have to got to be a little bit open-minded. Um, and people have to be willing to talk assertively, not aggressively. Assertive is respectful. Aggressively, it's like you're telling someone to like fuck off and stuff like that. And like, we're not doing that. Um, so I had that great moment with my mom and like I felt so much better because I was like, oh, cool. Like this was someone who had like these views and now she's just starting to see things a little bit differently. And I think it helps us get closer to one another and also practice that compassion towards ourselves. It's like, okay, like this person, doesn't like we're not meeting each other exactly where we would like to, but we're finding ways to like sometimes meet in the middle or at least be able to have these conversations to understand. Um, Yeah, and grow and like, accept the human experience. Yeah.
Well, hey, you can always teach a old dog new tricks. So it's as long as the dog is
Yeah.
not dealing with like sicknesses or like not being able to see. It's you can always bring a new point of view to them as long as they're willing to listen. So, um, or as I like to say it, as long as the dog is not deaf. So yeah, I mean, my mom, at one point during high school, I had a 3.4 GPA, and she was like, "Oh, you're not going to college. You're gonna fail. You're a failure because you didn't go to college." And now, after improving the grade, and even though it's still not the best, able to get into college, and she still has that mindset where she's like, "How did that even happen?" The funny thing with my family though is, with anything else other than grades, I'm usually more adult in the situation. My mom will be like, "Dye your hair," and I'll be like, "No, because I don't want to dye my hair." And she'll be like, "Go experience life, do this, do that," and I'm like, "No, ma, I just want to stay at home and be me and just trying to work on whatever I'm working on." And she doesn't seem to like the fact that I focus more on business. I like to do work. That's the way I kind of de-stress because I have something to work on and I use my brain in that sort of situation. With anything else, I'm sort of kind of awkward in social situations, especially with like conversations when I'm not having my caffeine. Otherwise, I am I people can't handle me at that level. I'll just be too ahead of them in like speed and stuff. They'll be like, "What? What did you say there?" And I'm like, I said that liver tastes like pancreas, and I'm that's disgusting. And you know, with other things, especially food, I like eating food as well. That's my way of distressing, and that's her way of saying you're going to get fat. But moving on, Do you think like there's someone in your life that kind of is most pivotal in your journey to becoming a counselor?
Um, Honestly, I think my mom. I think my mom. We butt heads a lot when I was younger, and I mean we still do. I mean, it's gotten way better. My mom's gone through a lot of things too. Um, and I look up to her so much because um through as much as shit as she has gone through, she has always approached life with like treating people with kindness. Um, and she is a very, very caring and loving person. So like I think that's like um what I've learned from my mom. She's always like treat people with kindness. She's like treat people how you would like to be treated. And she would say that all the time when I was younger. Um and that really stuck like it stuck with me a lot. Because well, I mean, yes, because at first it was when I was younger, it was like a lot of people pleasing. Right? That's how I had interpreted, or yeah, at some points. But I've unlearned a lot of those things. I mean, it still comes up here and there, but I've unlearned. Um, but yeah, so I went to school and then I was like a special education paraprofessional. Um, I worked in like the Western New School District in Hudson County. Ooh, hi people. And my mom has always what she instilled in us was like a lot of like you are not better than anyone. No one is better than you as well too. Um, be kind to people even when they're assholes. But obviously like stand your ground and respect and all of that, right? Um, so I remember as a para, I wasn't allowed to speak to the parents, and there was like a language barrier because the therapist there, the ABA therapist, which I have a whole other with ABA now. But again, I've unlearned and relearned new things. The parent was Spanish speaking, and the therapist did not speak Spanish at all, and I'm like that barrier there. I was like, it was driving me insane. Um, and I could hear my mom like, oh, offer help when you can and stuff, but I was not allowed to. Um, so I think that had pushed me, and like my mom. I mean, like even now, my morals before everything, my ethics, I do follow the code of ethics very strongly in therapy, but also like including like that humanistic approach because like we are human. Um and like I've left places because things were going on that I was like unacceptable. No, I'm not. This is not helping people out, and I'm not going to be part of a system that um we're like gatekeeping um accessible health. And so like I'm fine leaving those places, and I think also just like grad school helped me out, maybe radical in the sense of like if I do see something that is not right, I do feel more inclined to speak up in those spaces because I know it's often very hard for people to speak up. Um and yeah, I mean I always tell people, I'm like, I'm ready to fight. Just let me know. Just ready to know. And obviously not like fight like throwing punches. Like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not going to hurt you like that. But like, yeah, if there's something going on, like, I definitely want to like talk about it and like let's find solutions to it, or let's just find a way to work through this together. Um, but yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
see you like swatting your hand at the fly here and there. I'm like, okay,
I know.
the fly is pretty pugnacious there, isn't it? And I'm surprised there's a fly in the winter. Usually in my house there's like flies in the basement, of course, which is the most annoying thing. They kind of land on you here and there. They're like, come, let me suck on your skin or whatever. It's very very weird on flies in the
It's
winter.
these little gnats. I have a lot of plants in my house, and like,
Makes sense, yeah.
like my lemon tree's there, so these little gnats just like come through, and then I also have like clay and stuff, so it's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, gnats are very annoying. There's like a cloud of them always, so it's kind of like you're walking and all of a sudden you have a gnat in your mouth because you're just running straight through like a cloud of them. Uh,
The worst is when it gets in your eye,
oh yeah,
man.
yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I I had one get in my nose, and I was like, oh, come on, oh shit, there's like a gnat in my nose, and I'm like, I guess I'm sniffing bugs now. Um, so you talk about like education and stuff helping you with dealing with your own feelings, and um, well, you got your bachelor's of art from Rutgers, and artists are commonly I kind of notice in a lot of history. There's like Van Gogh. There's like a bunch of other artists that I notice are understood by the public as being crazy and emotionally unstable. But based on your personal experience, what can you say about the misconception where your peers struggling with mental health issues themselves, or just a plain, misconception about artists being crazy?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, Van Gogh, right? Like everyone was like, he's so crazy and stuff like that. When like, what was the artist? Gauguin, right? Paul Gauguin. Like he was. A lot of the artists back in the day were like they were assholes to him too. Um, Shout out to Professor Toppy at Rutgers for providing that information to us. Um, but yeah, um, I know I still have. It's funny that you said that because I remember like my family saying like, "Oh, God, that's crazy!" Like she's an artist. Even the things like she draws, it's wild. Um, yeah, I just always tell people I'm like, I know like I know we all judge, right? There goes the flag again. But I always try to be like, check yourself. Check yourself when that first thought comes up. It's like, okay, like why am I saying this? Or like what is it about it? Because usually that judgment comes from like not understanding or not knowing or that discomfort when it comes to um, being face to face with something that we are not used to. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I like very weird art. I always tell people I'm like, just be authentically yourself. I appreciate your art. As long as like not hateful. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, with art, there's like definitely some situations where like, yeah, it's true, but at most artists, they're kind of like just creating art. That's just them. I mean, my friend is not crazy. She's just doing her stuff. She's just drawing great, um, pictures about animals and stuff. Sketches, and I feel like it's more misunderstood about artists that they're not all crazy. It's just sometimes people interpret that because people kind of connect creativity with a chaotic mindset. Are you comfortable with talking about your biggest regret, perhaps?
My biggest regret?
Yeah.
Ooh, what is my biggest regret right now? Oh man. That's a good question. I don't, if you would have asked me this maybe like 5 years ago, I think I would have been able to name a lot of things. Um, but now, I've gotten to a place in my life now where I'm like, yes, I can look back and be like, oh, I wish I would have done this sooner, or wish um, you know, okay, for example, like before I used to be like, oh my God, I wish I had done my gotten my BFA, but with like let's say some like added in like some business or like graphic design because like that was doing well like in the field, and I was like thinking of like I need a job after undergrad, and it was very hard for me to get a job because everything like especially when it comes to fine arts, it's like you either need to get an MFA or like be like you need that type of privilege. And I was like, right when I I was helping my mom a lot financially. Since I was younger, especially like after I graduated, I was like, oh, like I need to step up. I need to help the family out. Um, so I do remember me like, "Oh, I wish I hadn't gone to like school for this, or I could have used my time for that, or why did I wait? Why did I wait like 5 years after undergrad to go to grad school? All of these things. But now, how I see things is I was like, you know what? Um, I had to follow the path that I was on and experience all these things, whether they were good or bad, in order to get to the point of where I am now. And I have learned a lot of lessons. Some were very painful, some were great, some were like, I didn't want to. What? All right, but um, like I think, like for example, like those 5 years between that I was, because I remember when grad school, I was like, oh my God, I'm like one of the older heads here, da 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 da. But I was like, well, you know what? Like I have 5 years of life experience of going through this, going through that. So I'm gonna try to see it that way. It's a lot of reframing. Yeah, because right now I don't, surprisingly, because I haven't like thought about this in a long time. Um, but I don't think I have any regrets at this moment. I mean, who's to say? Like maybe tomorrow something will happen. I'm like, oh my gosh, right? Um, but I'm gonna still try to like reframe and like, okay, you know what? Maybe like in a couple of years I will look back and be like, oh, you know what? Like, let me see these things from like a different perspective. But yeah, that's it.
I mean, it's great to have no regrets. A lot of people currently are like, I regret going to college. I'm going to commit to because I feel like I didn't do enough research. But personally, I don't think regrets are supposed to hold you down as much because um, life just leads you where you eventually want to go to. Because you do something
Mm-hmm.
wrong, it'll get back on path to where you're going to try and go to at that point. I'm struggling now. At that point, and uh, I just feel like as you go through life, there's like certain problems here and there, but that's going to fix itself. And I feel like everyone who has a regret eventually does not have any more regrets. Um, and to get to that point, you kind of have to think in different terms of having no frame. Because for me, I'm usually just, you talk about reframing to like a certain um, moment or perspective or life at that point. I just don't have like a set frame of what to do, so I don't have a restriction on myself. I'm more like outside of that, and that's kind of the way to think. I think because at that point you're kind of being like, oh, whatever, you do this, get back on path at some point. As long as there's hope, there's going to be a way to go get forward. How are you feeling right now? How are you doing?
Um, I'm okay. I'm okay. I mean, um, like with everything that's going on with our world, especially our country, I mean, like that's a whole other question. I mean, that adds into like parts of like where I'm at right now. But I'm trying to, there's a lot of things that we can control, and there's a lot of things that we can't control at this moment. In our lives in general. So what I try to do is try to, again, not repress my feelings or anything like that, share how I feel, share my thoughts, whether it's to myself or someone else or to the wall, whatever it is. Um, and remind myself, okay, what are things that I can control right now in my immediate, uh, in my life, in my surroundings and stuff like that? What are things I can't control, and what are things that I can do to ground myself? When a lot of things they add on to like that overwhelming feeling and fear and stuff. Some people say take it day by day. Sometimes for me, I'm like, I even take it small. I'm like, let's take it hour by hour, every 15 minutes by every 15 minutes, every minute by minute. Like it is okay. Um, so like catering to where I'm at right now to be at a good spot. Yeah.
This is the closing, and do you have any final thoughts you would like the audience to know about, or do you hope they take away from this podcast or this episode?
Yes. Okay. So I have a few things. One, um, shout out to the youth of America. And I also want to say, especially to any young folks listening, be gentle with yourselves. Um, you guys, oh my gosh, like I remember like how school was for like my generation. I can't imagine, right? Because I'm not in your age group of like the amount of pressure you guys go through and the expectations that are put upon you, like from school and society and stuff like that, is so immense. So, really give back time to yourselves, whether it's to like grounding techniques or, you know, saying like, you know what, I have a few moments for myself. Let me just like disconnect from things. Let me just do something that I really enjoy doing, whether that's like baking or just even like watching TV or just like reminding yourselves like it is okay to feel whatever you're feeling. Um, you're not going crazy. And if you know, we're all a little crazy, so that's okay too. Um, and yeah, just I would say slow down. Slowing down has helped me a lot. Um, whether it's like when I get very nervous or just like to get my thoughts shared, or yeah, so just be gentle on yourselves. Um, and then I also wanted to thank you because I heard, so I've been listening to the podcast ever since you guys emailed me, and the first episode, again, I'm very emotional. Um, I appreciate your vulnerability. I think that takes up a lot of strength. When I heard it, I was like, holy shit. Like, it's so cool, um, you know, hearing someone be so honest and so vulnerable. Um, that is something that I admire. It's something that I'm like, damn. Um, I sometimes I'm like, damn, I wish I was like that when I was younger. That's so cool. Um, it's like you really put yourself out there. Um, and I still consider myself like a very shy person. And it's interesting because I'm like, oh wow, I chose a field where I have to talk to people all the time. Um, and I also when I have like these like fears and stuff like public speaking, I am very nervous about. And like even when I got the email to like meet with you, I was like, oh my God, I freaked out. And I was like, okay, you're afraid, so you should do it. Because like you got to push yourself a little bit because I also had like very severe like social anxiety when I was younger. Um, but yeah, so I appreciate you a lot, and I appreciate you holding this space for people. Um, it is I admire the work you're doing, and
Thank you.
yeah, hopefully we can keep in touch in the future. If you ever need anything, let me know. Um, even if it's like providing resources or support or shoot, like referrals to therapists, because I also know like very great ones. Um, um, but I hope you have a very gentle Sunday and take time to rest, drink water. Um, yeah, it was so nice meeting you.
Yeah, nice meeting you as well. And I just want to point out with that first episode I was doing, I was so nervous. I did 5 takes on that one, and before I did that, I was like, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna eat a bunch of hot noodles, speak my mind, and that's it."
Noodles.
Um, my friend listened to it, and she was like, "You're so nervous on that episode. Were you okay there?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm just high on spice, which is what I'm doing. I'm high on caffeine right now, but that's sort of a different effect on me." Um, yeah, you just talk about taking it slow, and with that, my audience, sweet people who are taking this mental medicine. Um, I hope you slow down, and I hope you slow down on your brakes because it's icy outside in New Jersey. And have a nice day. This has been Mental Medicine Not Prescribed. I'm your host, Winston. Thank you, Catherine, for coming on this. And I guess we'll see you next episode. Bye.
Mm, thank you.